Life in Letters.
The presenting sponsor of My Life in Letters is sprayplanet.com. This is where you go to get everything MTN colors, be it 94, hardcore, whatever it is, go check them out. They're also the distributor of Crink products, Posca markers, and Grog inks. So go check out sprayplanet.com right now, order something, and go make your mark. But without further ado, let's get into this next episode. My Life in Letters. We are back again. I am Adam. I am in Bushwick on the phone right now from the Bronx, USA. A living legend. I'm just going to say it straight up. Bio from Tats Crew. Man, we're so honored to have you here. I feel blessed that you have taken the time out of your life to make this call, especially early in the morning on a Friday. Yeah, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's important too, you know, that we get guys like you. We'll talk a little generationally. I'm wondering, just knowing the year that you first started writing, if you consider yourself a third generation New York City graffiti writer. We'll get there. But regardless, you guys, you pioneers, first, second, third generation guys from New York, it's pivotal for us that we get your story on the podcast. And so again, thank you. And, you know, we were talking before the podcast about some early memory that you may have, some early experience about lettering or just about, you know, the words in general. I mean, I know that you're a bit of the letter man, if you will, for Tats Crew, letter specialist.
Right.
So I'm really interested in knowing what's happening with you before graffiti that got you into letters.
I mean, before the graffiti, like anyone else, you always saw like the comic book letters, that kind of stuff. But I think my first time actually having to design letters was probably around fourth grade. The teacher said gave us a project to create a logo using your initials.
Oh wow!
And I did the project before I even left the class that day. I wasn't even waiting to get home. I just, as soon as she said it, I just right away started, you know, trying to create a logo with my initials. And I think that was my beginning, my fascination, you know, kind of like warping letters and trying to create my own.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a crazy story, man. Like that teacher, that's really kind of like forward thinking of her. I mean, you told me that you were born in 66. So this had to
Correct.
be around, if you said you were in fourth grade, so you're about 10. So this is like 1976. I think that's really interesting that this teacher was saying make a logo for yourself. Like that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. That was a project that immediately just appealed to me right away, and I was like, I want to try this. And I already enjoyed drawing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I already enjoyed drawing. You know, I had like one of those black and white composition notebooks that I would do all these, like, I guess trying to do graffiti style, whatever, just copying letters I saw, you know, and just working on that. So for me, right away, that was just like, wow.
So when you were 10 years old then, also, and you were born and raised in the Bronx, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you're doing this logo in 1976. Also, were they, are your initials WF?
WF, yeah.
Right? So you're doing this WF logo. Did you keep it, by the way? Did you guys preserve that little drawing?
No, I don't have that. I have no idea what that is.
Do you remember kind of what it looked like?
I don't even remember. I remember just extending like part of the W taller and just kind of crossing the top half of it, and then just trying like different variations of it.
That's cool, man. And you said you did it before you even left the class, but it was like a homework assignment?
Yeah, it was supposed to be an assignment that you bring in the next day. I did it before we even left that day.
Yeah, and was that it? Were you done, or did you go home and work on it a little bit more, or were you like, oh, this is it?
No. By the time I left, I already had a few verses, and I was done before I left the class.
And then, do you remember? The next day, did you guys all present those logos to the class?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did, and we did. I don't remember the turnout of that, but I don't think everyone else was as interested as I was in that project.
Yeah, and like, and then I'm just, I'm interested, right? Because it's 76 in the Bronx, and so there's definitely, or I want you tell me, like, what did the Bronx look like? What did the streets, the walls, transit, as far as kind of markings that you may have seen? Because you're saying that you were already maybe replicating maybe graffiti letters in your composition book. What were you seeing?
What I call graffiti letters is what I thought were graffiti, like like bubble letters from comics and stuff like that. I don't even think I considered graffiti because I didn't even know about graffiti then yet.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't like entered into my consciousness yet.
Mm-hmm. And
I mean, it was there, it was around, but it was something that I didn't register yet.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it wasn't. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I finally took notice of the writing around me. You know.
mm-hmm. Also, do you remember in particular any comics that like really stood out that you were focusing on replicating letters from?
I had like the Beetle Baileys, the Harger, the Horrible. You know, all those old, really old Dick Tracy.
So these were like
You
Sunday
know,
morning comics.
yeah, like
Uh-huh.
Sunday morning.
Uh-huh. Nice. And what part of the Bronx did you grow up in?
I grew up in Bronx River Projects on 174th Street in Bronx River.
And I'm really interested in that housing project. I mean, there must have been just lots of markings in the hallways and around
Right,
benches and just around. But like you said, at 10 years old, this was sort of background. This was sort of just like white
right,
noise of the community.
right.
But do you have any recollection like of maybe you weren't focused on it, but do you have a memory of what it might have meant to you as a little boy, seeing all those markings, all that writing?
Again, it was just there. It was not. It was just part of my natural, environment. It was not something that I was aware. It was just, for all intents and purposes, for me, it had always been there. You know.
Right.
So I never took notice until I really took notice. Then I started kind of trying to read the names. I remember there was one name in particular, L.S. Little Sly. I never found out who that was, but I remember seeing that in the neighborhood. I'd seen like an old Cool Hurt tag. And from there, I noticed like Shy 147 was one of my early memories where I noticed tags in the projects. But, early on, once I noticed the subway graffiti, it was just, from then on, it was just like the city became this whole book for me, reading everything,
Right. Yeah.
I remember just Comet and Blade was a big, thing for me. I remember just seeing so many trains with Comet and Blade drops. And I remember as a kid driving downtown in a car, and I think it's on the FDR Drive, seeing Comet and Blade from the Bronx. And I was like, oh my goodness, these guys are everywhere.
And so I'm interested because you said, well, actually, we'll go back to Little Sly. So this is like, I'm presuming this is a neighborhood guy or a neighborhood girl. We don't really know, but you would see this
right.
writing throughout the project and what, throughout the neighborhood?
Yeah, it was in the neighborhood, LS, and I was like, who is? I never found out who that was, but it was just one of the first names that I became aware of.
And was that around, you said it was a couple years later after 76, so was that around 78?
This is probably around that time, 78, 79.
And like, what was 12-year-old Bio all about besides drawing in a composition book? What else was happening with you as a young man? Were you into music? Were you caught up in the newly formed, like, well, disco was transitioning at this stage?
No, I mean, yeah, I was a kid, so I was just a normal kid. Go outside, hang out in the neighborhood, play basketball with my friends, whatever. We had a pool in the park, and since we lived in the projects, we kind of like had a big playing field, so running through buildings, riding on top of the elevator, that kind of stuff.
I've heard a lot of great stories about how the projects were sort of pre-Reagan era. And, like there's a real negative, like, view of the housing projects now, but I've heard from a lot of people that it was like a real positive place back in the 70s. What was your experience?
It was a sense of community. I mean, you know everybody from your neighborhood. Like, even though they may have been like 8 or 9 buildings, you knew somebody from every building. So you could go to any corner of the project and know people. And again, when I say it was a sense of community, like, no one from outside the projects could come and start trouble with you or bother you, because people in the projects were going to protect you because you're from that neighborhood.
Right.
So there was a sense of community, even though people be like, projects are wild, projects, they're all that, yes. But again, there's more, there's families there, there's friends, there's a whole lot going on. It's like a world within itself.
Yeah. And I think it was actually Doc that in his interview talks about how, before Reagan came in, it was a working class community. It was very positive. There was love everywhere. And then when Reagan came in, he cut all this funding. He sent all these welfare recipients into the buildings. And by 1983, 84, whatever it was, they were a completely unrecognizable place. I think it's just an interesting thing for us to remember and document here on the podcast that for a long time, the projects were a really positive force in most people's
Right.
lives. And it sounds like it was that for you too, because community was like the word that you brought up a couple of times.
Right.
And, you know, without digging too deep into it, I wonder how long did you actually live in those housing projects?
I was there since I probably moved out when I was about 18 or whatever, somewhere around there, 18, 19. So I lived there since I was a kid, so about 18, 19 years old.
And do you remember coming back to it later in life and seeing the transition and what it was?
Yeah, I mean, I still go back. I still have friends there, you know, so I still go to the projects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously it's changed. You know, a lot of people have grown up, moved out. But,
yeah.
you know, I've seen the projects go through many changes where now they have like all these cameras set up and, you know, certain pathways are cut off just for, I guess, you know, security reasons and stuff like that. So it's a funny feeling. But I remember when crack was introduced to the projects, you know, we would see, you know, sisters of our friends, you know, our friends' sisters going from like these beautiful women to like these bony skeleton looking women, and you're like, and it happened within a matter under a year, you know, like this transition.
Yeah, that must have been hard to see. But you know, also I like that you brought up community, because I feel like Tats Crew, like that's a big part of what you guys do, and we'll touch on that later in the interview, I hope. But I can tell that you know, that part of your childhood really it just continues today, and I appreciate that.
Right.
So you're seeing LS tags, right? And then you said you saw Shy 147. So I got to ask about that, because I feel like I've heard from a lot of these interviews that there were a lot of people writing stuff, let's say like Little Sly, but that he may not have been a graffiti writer. He may have just been a neighborhood guy with a pen. Whereas, I mean, I feel like when I hear a name like Shy 147, I'm like, oh, that's a writer. Right.
Right.
When were you able to learn the distinction between those two things?
As I got older, I had a friend in the project who I remember. Well, let me go back. I saw graffiti on the subway, right? I didn't know what it was. So I went back to my neighborhood and I started asking everyone. I was like, I saw some stuff on the train, and they're like, oh, that's graffiti. You know, you got to get a name. You got to get up. So there was this one guy named Kenny who used to write graffiti. So I started asking Kenny about, you know, Grags. And then, you know, he explained to me, he was like, that's Shy. You know, there was a Shy tag in the project. Oh, and I was like, oh, shit, I need to get a name. I got to get up. And then, you know, Kenny had a little better. Actually, Kenny was the one who was kind of responsible for my name. Because I was trying out different names. And then Kenny, we were in the hallway, and he did like a BIO tag. He had like a really good hand style. You know, back then, I think, you know, an important part of graffiti was the hand style, the tag.
Definitely.
And I was like, oh, I like the way those letters fit. And I kind of just stuck with the name. I still have it, you know, so 30-something years later.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're hanging out with Kenny. What did Kenny write, or did he?
Kenny used to write VUE.
VUE. View.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you and Kenny are hanging out. Is this 78? Is that around the same time?
No, this is probably like 80.
80. Okay, so let me just pull back a little bit. So between 78, when graph kind of now is on your radar, you have an understanding. You're on the train and you're seeing it. Like you mentioned, you saw those Comet and Blade trains. I also love that story, man, that you were driving down the FDR, I presume with family, and you see something downtown and you're like, oh, damn, like these guys aren't just in the Bronx. They're taking this further.
Yeah, to me that was like, wow, like these guys are superstars.
And so then, like, talk about a little bit about, let's say 78, 79, before you get to that hallway moment with Kenny. How did your understanding, or how did your development within even just noticing graffiti change?
As soon as I became aware of it, you know, I started looking for it everywhere. You know, I started seeing like El Marco 174. And to me, I was like, he must live around here because this is 174th Street. But then 174th Street runs a long way. It goes like there was a bridge that connected to the other side of 174. So I was always like, I wonder who that was. I never found out who he was. But it's to see like El Marco 174. So I was kind of just tracking it and then trying to, I guess, figure it all out. I just started meeting other guys my age who knew probably less than I did, or maybe a little more, and kind of like started, creating this friendship. Like everything now around me was starting to develop was based around graffiti. Like I need to find out more. I need to, like really dive into this.
Yeah. Yeah, and like,
but I still hadn't gone to trains or anything. I still hadn't painted anything.
Yeah, I know, and like even that little thing of understanding that maybe El Marco 174 had to do with the street that he grew up on or lived on. Did someone like teach that to you, that maybe that number would be associated with their street, or do you just come to that on your own?
No, I just kind of came to that assumption. I was like, 174, this is 174. So I'm like, must be from around here, maybe,
And so then, as time passes, you're just like, of course, also you're just a kid and you're living your life. And I know that. And sometimes I'll dig really deep on little moments in these years before the first tag, because sometimes things come up, but I understand you're just living your life as a kid, but you are spending more time now looking for it. I'm curious, what it was like in your home. Was I obviously you were drawing a lot, which makes me wonder if your parents encouraged you to be artistic.
No, my parents I don't even think they were aware of what I was doing. Like, it was like I had, again, my little notebooks where I would draw and sketch, and I don't even think, my father was working, my mom was working, so, we probably see each other in the evening or whatever, but it wasn't a thing where they were like looking over my work and stuff like that.
Okay.
Like I don't even think they knew. They didn't know till later on.
Yeah. Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a brother. I had a younger brother.
And what was he? Was he doing any art?
No, not yet. He hadn't tried it yet. He tried for a quick minute later on. But
okay. And so basically you were just like, you were doodling like most kids were, just doing your thing, living your life. And then how did you meet this kid, Kenny, VUE?
Kenny lived in the projects. He lived in one of the other buildings.
Okay.
And kind of, knew each other from the neighborhood. And somebody was like, oh, Kenny writes or whatever. So, kind of immediately, let me find out what Kenny knows. I need to get Kenny's information, what he knows on this stuff.
Okay. And so then it's 1980, right? And you guys are hanging out.
Right.
And you're in the hallway, and had you already been playing with any tags on your own before that day?
I had tried like a few names. I had tried like DAB. I did a VIO. What was it? VIO, BIC, but there was a BIC, so I had to, I kind of stopped that name.
Mm-hmm. And where'd you get those names? Like a tag like DAB or DAB? Like what was that?
I have no idea where these names came up. I was just reaching for letters, looking for a short 3-letter name.
And that's interesting too, right? That it was a 3-letter name. I had a lot of guys saying, they were like taught to have like, you could do 3, but like 4, and then you max out at about 5. But you were into like, you wanted a 3-letter name. That's what you wanted.
I wanted a 3-letter name, yeah.
And maybe you saw LS and then you saw Shy, so you were like, okay, 3, 2, even 2 letters is acceptable.
Yeah. Keep it short, yeah.
Yeah. Did you put any of those tags outside of, let's say, a hallway? Did you ever put a DAB or a VIO?
No, I did those mostly in the project hallways.
Okay. And so now you're like 13, 14. You're hanging out with Kenny, and he does this bio tag. So aside from the fact that like he had like nice hands, was there something else about the name Bio that like kind of struck you or like had some sort of a resonance with you?
Well, I mean, the only resonance was that it was close to my other name, Bio, because I tried VIO and I tried BIC. So I was like, all right, it was kind of like a combination of both names. And so when Kenny tried it, and then, his hand style was like really nice. He had this really nice BIO. I was like, wow, it looks good together. I'm like, so I kind of stuck with it.
And I'm also interested, like, when you talk about hand styles, because I still agree that I think if you don't have hands, you're lacking a real important element, right? A fundamental element of being a graffiti writer. And I know a lot of dudes who can do a real dope piece, and their hands are just like terrible, and it kind of makes me sad. But what I'm interested in is back in that day, 1980, a guy like Kenny, was his style, would you call his hand styles like a Bronx style? And could you differentiate back then, maybe looking back now?
I'm pretty sure it was I don't know where I know he was influenced by guys like Shy, Cos 207, who used to write Drake also. And all these guys, they had a crew of rock stars, ROC, Rock On City. I'm pretty sure Kenny got influenced by them, and who they got influenced, I don't know. You know, I don't know who their influence was, but I'm pretty sure that was the style in our neighborhood. You know, I remember there was a schoolyard that Shy, Kaz, Kel, you know, used to have pieces, and it was a school called, I think it was CS 77, and they would do like these little simple pieces in that schoolyard. And we would go sit there, look at them, you know, look at the pieces. Like, we never seen them doing it, but we just saw the pieces there, and we're like, that was kind of like the style that influenced us early.
And so was that around the same time? Was that 80 or even before then? That you
This is around 80. This is about that time, you know.
And CS 77. So what did they have? Did they have a handball court? Did they have?
No, there was it wasn't a handball court. It was like kind of like a entrance. It was two buildings, and then the interior of that building was kind of like it had one fence inside. It was kind of like this. I don't know what to call it. It was kind of like a space in between two buildings. It had walls on either side and a fence, and then it was like some stairs that led up to it.
Okay.
And at night or during it was kind of like hard to see from the street, so you can actually chill there and hang out, paint.
So people were painting that in the day.
I don't know if they were painting. I don't know when they were painting it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I had no idea. I know the stuff was just always there. Like, I didn't
down, check it out.
I didn't paint there. I would just go there to look. My first piece that I ever did was actually next to 77. They had like a little school building, and there was like an alley that was maybe 3 feet wide. I went behind this little schoolhouse and did like a silver and green piece, which was probably no bigger than a foot or 2 feet. and I would go visit this thing every day.
And so before we jump into that, because I want to hear more about that story, once you've now chosen this name Bio,
right.
How did things progress for you? Did you like go straight into black books and start sketching? Did you take your tags in the hallways a bunch? How did it go? 1980.
No, I mean, first of all, remember, you had to get paint. You had no supplies. You had nothing. So the next thing you had to learn was how to rack. So, you know, the first things, like, I guess, like a lot of writers, the first cans I actually stole were those little model cans, those testers, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Those were the ones they used to have on the shelf, like on a Woolworth or whatever those stores where they carried them. You know, I went in there, got a few of those little cans, and that was my beginning. You know, that's the cheap paint. You don't know anything, so you're just learning.
Yeah.
So any supplies at that point is good, you know.
And
we had no.
Was Kenny teaching you how to rack, or how did you learn how to do that properly?
I mean, that was easy to learn. I mean, you had most of the kids at that age. You know, we were always out in the street. We had learned that early on, you know, from kids, you know, taking stuff from the supermarket. You're outside all day, you know, you steal a bag of chips from the store or whatever.
Okay. So it was like you just knew. It wasn't like something you had to be taught.
No. I mean, you had to know the stores where to get the paint, but other than that, you knew what to do.
So you go to Woolworth, you get your testers cans, and then what? Then you just started. Did you hit streets like right away, or?
No, I told you, the first thing I did was that piece in that schoolyard.
Okay.
And then after that, my first attempt on the subway, I went to. I remember, I think it was the Riga, and the trains were still silver and blue at that time, and that was the only layup I knew. I went there. I jumped in the middle of the tracks. I jumped in the tracks, went up to the train, and used the blue line as part of my fill-in. And then I think I filled in like baby blue. So it was baby blue and true blue, which using the line and a black outline. It was probably one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. But and it didn't even reach the window because I didn't even paint all the way to the window, to the bottom of the window.
Was this also 1980?
This was around 1980, yeah.
Okay.
And I remember waiting, you know, on the platforms for my little piece to go by, for my little, you know, blue and sky blue piece to go by. And I waited days till I finally saw it. I was so proud. I was like, it was like a magic moment, you know, and from that point on, I knew that I had to do this. And here's the crazy thing. At the time, I remember, I think it might have been the same train. I get on the train, I see the hand of doom. I don't know if it was on the other side of the car I did.
Oh, wow.
And seeing it painted. And I was like, you know, because Scene was a big influence, you know, for me at that time as well. You know, his clean lettering and you know, bright colors, you know, that made a big impact. So seeing something like that and compared to what I had done, I was like, oh my God, these guys have like endless amount of paint. They're like, they were, again, superstars to me.
Yeah. So I want to go back because I want to get some details on both of those pieces, actually. So that first silver and green joint that you did next to CS77, so that was racked paint. And I'm kind of amazed, dude, that the first thing you did was something filled in and outlined. Like, that's real. That's advanced, man. Most people talk about just the little scratches that they were doing, and then they got a crappy Sharpie pen, and then they got a Magnum or a Pilot. You went straight to spray paint right after you got your name.
Well, no, I had already been tagging with markers in the building. You know, I had already did that phase of tagging in the building with markers.
You had.
I hadn't done any street bombing or anything like that. Now, when I first got on the street, that's when I started using the spray paint.
But so you got comfortable with the name, like a lot of people in the hallways with markers.
Right.
Okay. And then what about the letter style that you did? Was it like kind of softy kind of bubbles that you did next to CS77?
Yeah, it was like, I don't even know what to call it. It was a mixture between bubble letters and straight letters. It was it was what I imagined to be a piece, a style.
Yeah, and did you sketch it before you went to the wall?
No, not that one. That one I kind of had already like been sketching an outline on paper, but I didn't take the outline with me. I kind of like
but you kind of had it plotted out in your head, basically what you were going to do.
Kind of plotted it out.
Also, after doing that first silver and green, it was I presume it was green outline, silver fill.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you feel, man? Like you know, being a 13-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid walking away from doing that piece.
I was happy. I mean, nobody could see it because it was hidden in this little 3-foot alley.
Right. But
I was happy. I was, like I said, I would go back, look at it, and you know, I was like, I want to do another one, so I had to get more paint. That's when I got the light blue and the dark blue. Then I wanted to hit trains.
Yeah. And for that train, for that mission, also, I'm curious, for that CS77, the first piece, did you go by yourself or did you have somebody with you?
Yeah, no, that one I was by myself in that one.
And then you go to this Riga yard, right? And you're going to go do this first train, this transit panel piece. I presume you didn't have tester cans. Did you go and get full-size cans for that?
Yeah, no, I had maybe like 3 cans. I had a light blue, a dark blue, and I think a black, and maybe a white.
Was that Krylon, or were you racking something like less quality than Krylon?
I'm not sure if those weren't Krylon. There was something, they were cheap brand.
Some auto paint or some dollar paint?
Yeah,
maybe?
I don't remember what brand. It definitely wasn't Krylon yet.
Okay. And what about that mission? Did you, I mean, you said you jumped down on the tracks and just did it. Were you solo that time, or did you go with someone?
Yeah, I was solo. That's the thing. I didn't even know, like, I didn't have a lookout or anything. I didn't know how it was done. I just knew those were the layups. I knew that.
Wow.
Like,
Ignorance is bliss, man, because like you just went down there and just did it. And little did you know that most people, was anyone getting jacked in train yards yet in 1980, or had that not Stick Up Kids? Was that happening yet?
That always existed. That existed before that.
Okay. Yeah. But you just didn't know. You were just too young, too green.
I was not unaware. Like, ignorance bliss. I'm going to paint a train. I jumped in there, tried it, got back up on the platform, and I was like, yes, I hit a train.
I bet, yo. And so how long did you spend on the tracks painting that panel?
It wasn't long. I mean, it was a little piece. Again, it was from the blue line down. So, it was something quick. I don't think more than 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay. And would you call that a similar thing, like a mix between a straight letter and a bubble, or had you gotten more focused?
It was just like this ugly thing. And it wasn't anything like really I was a toy.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, of course. And so then I like that. I like that story too, that you just like went onto the platform and you said you waited for days and you just waited and waited and waited. And when that train when it rolled up, man, that first time, because I think it's a lot different, right? To see your pieces moving through the city.
Right.
I can only imagine. What was that experience like emotionally? And like, how did you feel?
It was an amazing experience, but it was, what you need to understand, it was just a speck on a fucking system that was already bombed. It was like, I didn't even do it right. I didn't even reach the bottom of the window. I had done it from the blue line down. Yeah. But nobody else, I don't think anyone else noticed it it was like, you know, spotting a flea on a elephant's back or something. It was like,
That's a great
you know,
analogy. And then
but to me,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, to me, it was just a good, you know, feeling seeing it.
Oh, I bet. And were you with anybody when the first time you saw it, or did anyone else see it
No,
of your
no,
friends?
no. I was on the station. I think I was on Elder or something like Elder Station, and
Okay.
just I had been waiting already for days, and when it finally came out, and it was just a short, quick moment, seeing it, and it was like, yes.
Yeah.
I was on top of the world at that moment.
I bet. And then you see the Hand of Doom whole car, and you're like, oh damn. Like that puts things in perspective for you a little bit, right? You're like, these guys are going all out. How did they get all this paint? How did they go so big? And actually, I mean, there must have been a lot of whole cars floating around at that time. That must have been really eye catching.
Yeah, I mean, there was so.
I mean, you mentioned
There was,
Scene as being a big influence. Who were some of the other guys back then that were drawing your eye?
as I mentioned, Drake, who used to write Cos 207, you know, Shy, the guys from Rockstars, you know, Kel, Crash, guys like Zephyr, Dondi, you know, these guys were all, Comet and Blade obviously were early, you know, a lot of them for different reasons. Comet and Blade just because they were everywhere. And then Scene had that clean, you know, bright colors that appealed to you. But then guys like Dondi and like guys like the TMT crew, they had like that gritty, well, what I considered raw graffiti, like the rock star piece. So to me, like rock stars were like graffiti. They had like that raw style with, you know, tips, arrows, connections. So I was like, wow. To me, that was the.
I'm sorry, go ahead. To you, that was.
So to me, that was like what graffiti was. So I kind of took the clean colors, like bright colors of Scene, kind of incorporated into like what, you know, the rock crew was doing with the letters and the connections and the chips, and I kind of blended, made a fusion, and to me that became what graffiti was.
You know, I'm interested, man. Like I've spoken with a couple other guys from the same generation, and actually it was Scheme, in particular, who mentions that like he doesn't even like to use the word graffiti because of the old negative, like maybe meanings behind it. It sounds like you're just okay with it. I mean, maybe that's something you came to over time, but did you have a similar feeling to that word back in the day?
I mean, again, to me it was something. It didn't bother me as much as it did other guys. I remember like Volcan didn't like the word at all. Like he was like aerosol artist or whatever. Me, I just considered myself a writer. So the graffiti, I didn't even pay attention to the graffiti part, you know, like the word.
Yeah, you were just a writer.
Yeah.
You know, it's great to hear all of those influences, right? Because I think our listeners right now are like, yo, like Bio is that to me what Crash and Rockstars were to him. So like that lineage is always cool to break down. I also wonder, and you know, I tend to not jump to today, but I wonder if you can now, like hindsight is 2020, if you can look back and look at all the work you've done, like can you maybe associate your style or maybe your methods to like one or maybe two different writers from back then that are now like you just know that they're the biggest influence on you over time?
Again, I think the biggest influence, one of them has to be like Scene, you know, Dondi, and I would say like a few of the guys from Rockstars, from, you know, like again, Kaz, you know, Shy, Kel, those guys. That style to me was like the graph. So I think I took that formula and moved forward, and you know, over the years got influence. You know, guys like Zephyr's hand style. You know, there's certain things that you take bits and pieces from everyone.
Yeah, that's cool. And you know, you mentioned the colors like that Scene was using, and I think a lot of people know you for beyond your letters for doing really vibrant, colorful work. So that's cool for me to make that connection right between those two guys.
Right.
So I want to stick with 1980, and after you did that first piece, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how things progressed. I'm also really interested in how much time you were spending in Black Books refining letters in those very early years, those formative years, like 80 and 81.
I had been experimenting with the letters before I knew what graffiti was, you know. But then, you know, here's the thing: as I got into graffiti, I started seeing the different, like, you know, you had guys like Dez with that clean, simple style scheme. I had that clean lettering, but it was still graffiti. It had that funk, kind of like that little funky. It wasn't traditional lettering. It was kind of like, I kind of like, I like the simplicity of the letters, but I also like the way they would color in, like gritty colors. And I don't know, it was just, at that point, I was just a sponge grabbing all ideas from everywhere.
But so then, to my question, were you sketching?
Oh yeah, I was sketching. I was definitely sketching. Once I started, drawing in books, I started like sketching. I started actually doing my name for some odd reason instead of bio pieces.
Oh, really?
I was doing will pieces, like WIL. And then, I was learning to do connections, like bubble style. And again, it was all very primitive and toy, but my only influence was what I could see quickly on subways,
Yeah, and I'm interested in that too, because you mentioned Kenny, and so far, I think Kenny's like the only real writer that has like sat down with you and spent some time. Was that true for a while, or did you meet anybody in that 1980?
No, I met other guys. Again, like there was a bunch of younger guys from the neighborhood. It was like a guy used to write 10, another guy named Felipe used to write Rod, but they were all like, again, all these guys were influenced by ROC. I guess they had a very big influence in that neighborhood, that whole area, because we were on the 6 train, closer to the 6 train. So they had a lot of stuff in the 6 train area and on the actual 6 train. So I think anybody from that area, a lot of people were either influenced by Scene or them.
Yeah, and that's that's like an external influence. I wonder about more internally. Like, when did you get a mentor around that time that really sat with you?
No. Again, it learned from other kids my age. It wasn't like one. Actually, only when I got a little older is that when I met up with Shy, but I had already been kind of established by then when I actually met Shy, like to hang out with and be cool with. We had already started doing our own stuff. I didn't meet Shy till later. So realistically, it was just, there was no mentor. You learned on the street from your friends or, someone who knew a little more than you. And it wasn't like one particular person took you under the wing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because and actually mentorship, man, that's like it's a topic that I like to talk about often, because I think that, first of all, like at least when we came up in San Francisco, 80s and 90s, there was a real mentorship system in place. Someone brought you up. Someone just schooled you on everything, right? And I know that happened here during different eras. And the reason I bring it up is because it's almost completely dead with like the advent of the internet and everything else, right? Like no one has mentors basically anymore. And I think it's sad, actually. I think it's a real loss in the culture to not have the direct information being passed down. So, but I think it's also really cool, man, that like what a self-starter you guys had to have been in your time, because no one was doing that. You had to learn from each other. And so I'm also, when I was asking about the black books, I was just kind of curious, like if there was a phase where like you would just, like we did, like where you would meet up with your friends and you would sit down and all the black books would open and there'd be 100 markers out and everybody was piecing in books. Did you have that kind of experience at some stage?
Nah, you know what it was? 'Cause we had already started going straight to Subway, so it wasn't like we sat around to practice the books. Like we were already trying to be on subways. We had like the black book era. I did that alone at home. But once I started painting outdoors and I started meeting other people who wanted to paint outdoors, it was just a question of let's go get paint and go actually paint. So we actually painted, ugly as it was.
Yeah.
And by then I had met Brim. I had met Brim in junior high school. At that time, it was Brim, Bass, and then Brim knew Mac because Mac lived in Harlem, and that was like the beginning of our crew. It was originally TAT.
And so, what year was that in junior high that you met Brim?
That junior high had to be this all happened around the same time, like 82. This is still early 80s, like 82, 83, somewhere around there.
And when you met Brim, was he already Brim or was he not writing Brim yet?
Was Brim writing when I met Brim? I think so. I think he was. That's how we kind of connected.
And so, how did that go? How was that introduction? How did that happen the first time?
I don't even remember how I met Brim. It's so long ago. We met in junior high school, and Brim. I think Brim knew some place where to go get ink and stuff. And I remember at first him and Edgar, who used to write bass, used to go get ink, and they didn't want to tell me the spot. Then they finally took me, and we used to go steal. It wasn't even film. We were stealing this ink called Marsh Ink. And it was some spot, like it was like, I remember, like a stationery store. We used to go, and then they finally took me to the spot, to rack ink. I remember we used to steal all the school erasers to make homemade, markers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so then did Brim and that homie Edgar or Bass, they taught you basically like that, like how to build your own markers and how to flood them and do all that?
Yeah, no, the markers I already knew how to make the markers, probably from like some of the other kids from the neighborhood, like the other guys I was hanging out with. Because by the time I got to junior high school, I already had more knowledge, of the culture. So I just didn't know where to get the ink and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. But then Brim kind of put you on. Also, was it like back then, would you like introduce yourself as like Bio to people? Like were people calling you Bio? No,
it didn't even, it was kind of like this thing where you would see ink or, paint on somebody's clothes and they'd be like, what you write? And they'd be like, what you write? That whole little feel of what you write, what you write? Yeah. And you write, I write this. And then probably neither one of you were known, but, maybe one guy had a few more tags than the other. So he was like, ooh, he's the man.
Also, what was your experience in junior high like? Because I've heard from some people that like their schools, like every single person was writing. Like everybody had a name. Everybody had an answer to what do you write? What was your junior high school like?
My junior high school, not everyone. You had a fair share, of writers back then. I think during that time, Brim and Bass also introduced me to Bomb 5 back then.
Same junior high?
I don't know if Bomb 5 went to our school or I think we cut school and went to his house. And that's when, we had seen Bomb 5 had like all these black books with all these nice pieces in them, color. And at the time, he was a little more advanced than we were. He used to write with this other guy named Sid, C-I-D. And they had did, maybe one or two cars on the 2s and 5s. So we went to Bomb 5's house, checked out some of his books and stuff like that. And we just, as time progressed, we were meeting more and more people. But, we were still somewhat choice, but we were establishing ourselves now, So we got Max, so we had 4 of us now. Then we had moved on to high school. And then in high school is when I met Nicer and BG. And
so, also, what high school was that?
That was James Monroe High School.
Okay. And at James Monroe, now it's like what? It's 84 approximately when you meet up with Nicer and with BG?
High school was like 84, 85, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I think that there was just like historically, like there's a lot of media that's come out, Style Wars, and then Subway Art comes out. What kind of influence did those pieces of media have on you and on your friends?
I mean, when those things came out, like the book Subway Art, Style Wars, it was, for us, we were like, wow, these guys were the guys we were already watching. Mm-hmm. We had been watching all the artists who were either in Style Wars or, we lived it before the movie, so we already knew who they were. So that just kind of solidified in our mind, like, wow, these guys are like the stars.
Yeah. I mean, was there any talk, because, and like rest in peace, Diva on her episode told me that like, and maybe this came years later, that they understood that some of those Style Wars guys, and she says it like, no knock on them. They didn't know any better. They were actually giving up so much information when they were making that film that, then Vandal Squad and Transit Cops, like they just started to know the movements that you guys were making. Did you guys start to feel around the high school time, did you feel more pressure in the yards from police? No.
I mean, that always came with writing. That was part of the culture as far as I know it. Cops have always been a presence. Vandal Squad has always been a presence. So it wasn't like it changed. I mean, cops always knew where, before Style Wars, where they went to paint, how they did it. It wasn't a secret.
Yeah. And so it was always kind of hot. It was always a concern or a consideration for you guys when you were out painting.
Well, yeah, I mean, you knew for a fact that there was no time ever that you would go and not think that you might not think that you were going to encounter cops. You know, that was always a possibility. You know, when you first get to a layup, when you first got to a yard, you would check everything. You go, you know, the doors used to have like these rubber. You would open up the bottom rubber, look inside and see if anybody is hiding inside, and check the layup before you start even painting.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we put out that call to our listeners to ask questions directly to you through the interview, and the homie at Vice Rocks, he actually says that straight up. Like, how was it handling the Vandal Squad? And so I'm interested in asking, like, did you have any run-ins with Vandal Squad early on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you got chased, you have raids, you know, where you would go and stuff would be unfinished. You know, I remember one time us being on, I think it was a Zariga layup. It was me, BG, and a few other guys. And we see somebody, BG was like, I see somebody on the track. So we're like, so we go to the other side of the train, we look, and they're like, yeah, there is somebody on the tracks. So all of a sudden the guy starts making like these King Kong noises. Like, and I'm like, what the fuck? So then when we looked down through the tracks down to the street, because we were on elevated tracks, we saw his partner below. He was right under us. So they just kind of like, they weren't going to catch us. There was too many of us, and I think there was only like two of them, two of those guys. So it was just like, I guess, to scare us out of it. But we had to run, you know, leave our paint. So you had incidents like that, you know. But then we've also had incidents where we've been in full raid with guys that got caught, you know, grabbed. You know, guys, I remember one time there was this guy named Back. We got raided, and, you know, he immediately ran to the station. That's where all the cops were waiting at the station. Me and another guy, I think it was Coase, C-O-S-E. He was down at TDS. We kept running. We went past the station and ran to the next station on the track. Like, we ran the whole way along the track to the next station and got away. But it was just, you know, that was just everyday activity. Like, you know, you know, you can go a day, not get raided. You can go 2 days, not get raided. Then all of a sudden, the next day you get raided.
Yeah. But as far as like your own experiences, like you were blessed. You never got caught. You never got your house raided. And so Vandal Squad and you didn't have that close of a relationship. Okay. All right. Cool. Good to know.
No, because first of all, Vandal Squad didn't know where you lived back then. It was like, there was no internet. There was no, nobody really knew where you lived. You know, it wasn't like common information, like, you know.
Yeah.
There was that people weren't working with the police like that.
Right. That comes later. And so, you know, you mentioned that you met Brim in junior high, and then you get into high school and you meet Nicer and BG. What year then did you guys form the TAT crew?
That was in junior high school, so that had to be somewhere early 80s.
So you made Tat Crew with Brim before you met Nicer and BG?
Brim actually came up with the crew, TAT, and I remember the first time he showed it to me, it was in Mac's building in Harlem. Mac used to live in Harlem, and he was like, check out this crew, TAT, because you had TNT, you had TCT, you had TBT, you had a lot of, so we were like, A is the first letter of the alphabet, so we had TAT.
And what was the first meaning for TAT?
I think it was like tough ass team, the art team, and stuff like that.
And so you mentioned Brim, you mentioned Mac, yourself. Who else was in the original Tat crew back then?
Bass, BASE. You had Volcan. Then early on you had Nicer, BG. We had Raz with the Z. We had Raz with the S. Shame, obviously. Ken, them.
And so some of these guys got in much later. I'm curious about Tat Crew in junior high. Like,
in junior high, it was just me, Brim, Mac, and Bass.
Yeah, and like, what were you guys all about? Were you just continuing to do the same thing you were doing, or did you guys have kind of aspirations that Tat would grow into a larger crew at the time?
No, we had aspirations. We thought we were going to grow. You know, like Brim started bombing the inside, and Mac started killing the inside. You know, like bombing like the inside. So we felt, our crew is getting known now. You know, we're starting to actually be a crew. So we we continued, you know.
And when I've heard from guys like, there were some guys that just wanted to go to the yards to just like fuck up insides with ink. They just wanted to just crush, right? But
Right.
you're looking at guys like Scene and Blade and these guys that are doing beautiful whole cars, right? I mean, I'm sure they were doing insides too, but they were doing beautiful whole cars. How did you or did you have a way where you kind of split the difference, where you would have a night where you were wrecking insides, or they would do insides while you were doing a panel? How did it work for you guys?
Yeah, no, we actually Mac loved to do the insides. Like Mac was like, he was from our crew. He was probably the most prolific in terms of bombing the insides. He loved that shit. So we would go with Mac, bomb insides, and I enjoyed the insides too. I mean, that was just it was both to me. It was both important, insides and outsides. It was not, to me, it was like, all right, the outsides is where you got the most fame because you would see, these colorful pieces, but the insides also, had so many different guys bombing the insides who were up. So it was, at that time, to me, it was like equally important to do both, but then later on, as we started, getting more paint and racking, we just started doing pieces, and our goal was to do pieces, and we were like, we're going to do pieces, and we started believing that we were good, and people started believing that we were good, and I think at some point we actually became good.
You definitely did. I'm interested in that when you talk about people and their opinions, because something I forget to ask a lot of my interviewees is like, especially by this early 80s time, like the city was getting really fed up with the graph, especially I think the insides. I think it was just a big mess for a lot of non-graffiti people. And you seem like a really like self-aware dude, and you have like this connection to community. I'm curious, like, how did you guys, or did you have to like justify that you guys were tearing apart the insides of these trains that regular New Yorkers were riding every day?
Nah, I mean, it was our world, and it was the rest of the world.
Nice. Yeah, I do know. Yeah, cool.
It wasn't about all the other people who rode the subway. The subways were, in our mind, the subways were ours.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. And the outsides too, I mean, it's like, I think the outsides got a lot more appreciation from what I've just sort of gathered and heard over the years, because it was formulated, and there were colors and characters and all that stuff, right? But the insides, nobody understood it outside the graph world. So I'm glad that I asked that, because I always forget to ask. And it's also amazing to hear you say that to you guys, it was equally as important to do dope pieces and to be able to have hand styles and just crush the insides.
And you had the messier and drippier, the better. It just showed that you had ink. Like if you had flooded markers, it just like, this guy has a lot of ink. Like he has floody, juicy tags. He has 100 of them, 1,000 of them. And they're always flooded, so this guy has endless supplies of ink.
Oh, so you know what? You're the first person to make that sort of equation or analogy, that actually the more messy, the more you had, it actually spoke to like that. Like you had more value because you had more you had more supply, and with more supply, you're more closer to being kind of like a king or whatever. That's interesting, man. I never heard anyone kind of phrase it like that. That's cool.
Because dry marker tags, you look like his marker's dry. Like, what the fuck?
Right, this dude must be busted. But these other guys, Mac, everything is drippy. That dude's on lock. Okay, that's cool. That's really interesting to hear. And I think it's also interesting that you said that you guys wanted to get better, and you knew you were getting better, because who was telling you that you guys were getting better? Who were you respecting that was giving you feedback back in those early days?
By this time we were in high school. It wasn't even like it was just other writers who had less pieces than us, who were probably not that far behind us in terms of style, but they were like, "Oh, you guys, that came out good." So we were like, "Oh shit, our shit is coming out good," even though it was whack.
Right.
It was fucking terrible at the time, but we knew a little more than they did. So they were like, "Yo, you guys are good." Just your peers from high school or other writers and stuff that you knew, because you weren't friendly with too many writers. Not everybody, was that social back then.
Sure.
We kind of stood within our crew, but we knew, we had eyes and we could see, all right, we have more stuff than some of the other guys out here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're starting to make a name for ourselves.
Oh, also, I didn't even get specific on which train lines you guys were focusing all your energy on.
Well, we started out on the 6 train, and then we moved on later in the career to the 5s and 2s, and then, the 4s.
Okay.
We were mostly like IRT number lines. We didn't focus too much on the letter line.
And was that like because of proximity, like they were just closer to you, or did you just not like? How did you make your choices about which trains?
No,
to go
I mean,
at?
I think, I know a lot of the guys from the letter lines are going to feel a certain way about this, but I just feel like the number lines were the more prolific lines. You had the best artists on the number line. Even though you had a lot of talented guys on the letters, but you had the 6 trains, you had the 5 and 2s, you had Common and Blade on the 5 and 2s, Don D, the CIA crew, TMT, TNT, PFA. You had United Artists on the 6, Rock Stars. You had TLP. There's just so many different crews, and I feel like those were the lines. If you were gonna make it in graph, those were the lines you had to like really get known on.
Yeah, and no disrespect, right, to the guys rocking.
No disrespect,
on the letter
you
lines,
got,
of course.
You got guys on the letter lines getting busy, doing just as much. But I feel like the letter lines kind of like got forgotten about somehow. Especially, I think when movies like Style Wars and all those things, highlighting the graph movement, focused, mostly on the number lines.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I'm also interested in talking about the lines. Like, had you guys ventured outside the Bronx yet to do yards? Did you go to Brooklyn?
Yeah, we did. We started going to Brooklyn, like doing tunnels, like in Utica, Kingston, out in Brooklyn. After a while, you just got where you go wherever you needed to go.
So was going all city that was a consideration for the Tat Crew?
No, all city wasn't something that was. We were more focused on piecing on lines. Like all city, when guys are going all city, you can't repeat like what guys like RTW did. Like those guys destroyed the system. Like those guys to me were like real all city kings. Like they had numbers, letter lines, throw ups, tags on all lines. So those guys can call themselves all city. We can't claim that because we weren't like that. I mean, we hit obviously a few letter lines, maybe one or two things here, but it wasn't enough to say, hey, we're all city like that.
Okay. And so that was like, I don't know what I'm getting at here. That was acceptable. You didn't need to go all city. You guys were trying to kill the 6.
No, you didn't need to be all city.
Yeah, okay. But you wanted to take the IRTs. You wanted to take them to task. You wanted to really go all out at the IRT.
Yeah, we wanted to make our mark, like on certain lines only.
Yeah, like as a youngster growing up in California, just sort of like, and again, I started writing in the early '90s. I would think about you '80s writers in New York, and now you're mentioning like you must have been so close to guys like Scene doing a whole car right in your backyard, basically. Did you ever have a chance, or did you ever bump into guys like that in the yards doing a big prolific train that we might know?
No. But here's the crazy thing is, at one point, I remember the first time we met Scene, he had slowed down, him and Dust or whatever, and we were doing a lot of pieces on the 6 train, and they had just painted him white, and I guess Scene, from his words, told us, I started seeing all the stuff we were doing, and he was like, oh, hell no, there's nobody taking over my line. and he just came back and did like fucking pieces, like 1 through 10, scene number 1, scene number 2, like a bunch of pieces back to back.
Wow.
On the white trains. And then we finally, I remember the first time, I think it was Mac, Scene and Shame, they went and did a car together. So now we were established. Like, we were already painted with guys like Scene now early on. So we were like, all right, we've made it. We're here at the level where everybody else is at,
Yeah. And like stylistically, back in, I want to stick with that high school time. What was your style like back then? What was Bio doing? Were you like getting to that funk that you mentioned, like Scheme and some of those guys were doing, or were you still really having to like kind of push to get that style?
To get the style?
Yeah.
By high school, let's see. I think I was doing okay by high school. Like by 85, I had already had a good grasp on piecing and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm looking back now, they look a little primitive, but for back then, they were already like, all right, these are good pieces. Like, these are good, solid pieces.
Mhm.
Like, I look back at some of the pieces that I did back then, like 85, 86, and if I were just to change up the colors and, use the newer technique, they would stand up today.
Nice. And, I'm also interested in that when you start talking about looking back, how much were you documenting with photographs, your work from your early years?
We try to document as much as possible. Actually, I lost a lot of early stuff because I let Brim my photo album, like a bunch of subway cars we had, and he took it up to Canada. He lost the book in Canada, so I had lost a lot of the early stuff.
Ouch.
And we still have a lot of stuff from the 80s, but we lost a good third of it,
Have you been able to recover any of those images, like from
No,
other people?
I don't
Really?
know. I don't ever know what happened to those photographs. They disappeared and never popped up again.
Hopefully one of our listeners knows where that photo album is, or they
That'd
just
be nice.
know where some of those, and were those like, was that?
Actually, I had one guy returned one, because he took two books. He took a small book and a big photo album. One guy returned portions of the smaller book. He reached out to me a couple of years ago. His girlfriend at the time, her father owned a restaurant where Brim left the book. So the father had that little book, and then, he got it from the father. He sent me whatever pictures he had from that part, and he explained to me how he got it. He said, my ex-girl, whatever, father used to own this restaurant. He had these books, and I was like, oh shit. So he sent me a few of the pictures. So I never recovered the main album.
Yo, but that's cool, man, that you got some of those back. Do you remember what part of Canada?
Yeah,
I'm only at, like, what part of Canada? Because we have Canadian listeners. You just never know,
I don't remember where Brim went that time in Canada.
Well, listen, Canadians, if you're listening to this and you're holding on to Bio's book, give it back. It's not cool.
Or at least scan and send me some photos.
Yeah, right. You can just at least do the scans. So yeah, I'm interested because I've heard some guys say, "Nah, we didn't document anything," but it's interesting to hear that you guys spent that time. You were bringing cameras into the yard and getting your flicks.
Yeah, we had a document, and then we had Ken, who, probably the only one that had a good camera. Ken and Raz, they would document a lot of stuff. I had, another bullshit camera that I used to document stuff, but I have a lot of old pictures and a lot of old negatives from back then,
Yeah, okay. And you said in high school when you get to James Monroe, that's where you meet Nicer and BG. I know
right.
you said you don't really remember meeting Brim. Do you remember the way you came across Nicer and BG? And were they Nicer and BG yet?
Well, Nicer, we didn't really want hanging around with us. I remember he was younger, so we didn't pay him out. BG I met in weight training class at first, and then I remember we met because the teacher was like, this is introduced me to him, and then he didn't have a lock, like for the locker, so I would let him share my locker. But I didn't know that BG drew. BG was an artist, he knew how to draw and stuff like that. So I remember going to art class, and they sit me down, and who's in front of me? BG. So I'm like, oh shit, it's the guy from gym. So then BG saw me doing letters, and he already knew how to draw. He was like, what are you doing? And I was like, graffiti. I was like, and then I was showing BG letters and stuff like that. And I remember that year, BG leaves, right? He's just learning about graffiti. School ends for that year, in like whatever, June, July, whatever it was. Come back in September, and BG's a fucking monster in graffiti. Like, he spent the whole summer practicing letters and how to piece, and just came back and was like, we were like, oh shit.
Wow. But he hadn't been doing letters before that.
No, he had not. He was more into drawing like portraits or drawing, like art, just straight up, art illustrating and stuff like that.
Wow. That's cool, man. So so that blew you guys away, and then you were like, oh, damn. And
then Nicer was in our art class as well. And, we kind of like all started hanging out together, me, Nicer, BG, and, Brim, Mac, kind of grew into the family. Then we started, going to the writer's bench and stuff like that.
Oh,
that's
really?
Where we came. So, yeah, that's where we came across Ken and Sim.
Well, also, I'm interested, like, what did Nicer have to do to get down? Like, if you guys were trying to not hang with him because he was younger, what made you say, oh, okay, we'll start kicking it with this cat?
Because Nicer started getting good, like, at drawing characters. Like, he had the ability to just draw stuff out of his head. like he didn't need a reference. And, you know, a lot of artists can copy well, but Nice could just create it out of his head. So you'll be like, Nice, you know, you started checking out his drawings. They were like, oh, Nice is getting good. And, you know, again, we were all early in our career in terms of as artists. So we kind of like fed off of each other. I remember the first time we met Shame at the writer's bench. He had a book. And again, Shane took a lot of heat, you know, for being like, you know, his style was very similar to Scheme, you know, being they were both from Harlem. And obviously, you know, Scheme had an influence on Shane. So his style was very similar and the characters were very similar to Scheme, but he was so good at it. Like he took it like to that one extra level, you know, where Scheme kind of left off. Shane took it from that point and kind of elevated the style to like where he created his own thing. And we were like, Shane is amazing. Like, look at these books. Like, he could draw characters. Simple style lettering was like some of the best you've ever seen.
And, you know, I'm really interested in hearing about the writer's bench. So just tell us a little bit about like, what's it like back in those days, 84, whatever it was, 85, you have a crew, TAT, and you're like, yo, let's go to 149th and just hang out. Like, what just kind of paint that picture for us a little bit.
The bench was a wild place. Before that, I mean, before we even started hanging out there, we had already been venturing there, and there were times you would go and not get off the train because you had older guys there hanging out, you know, like, you know, I remember guys like Smiley, Dez, you know, all these guys were a little older case. They're at the bench, bigger, older dudes. So you could go to the bench and easily get robbed. So we would go, the doors would open, and the shit just seemed wild. They were like, oh, fuck that, we're not getting off. So we, you know, it wasn't until we got a little older and a little more daring that we started getting off the bench. And, you know, you had fights at the bench, you know. People got robbed, they got into fights. You know, a lot of shit went down at the bench.
But then there was also a positive aspect where you could like meet up with this, like basically this community that you have. Would you meet other writers there? Would you exchange? Yeah,
you would meet other writers. You would, you know, make other connections or get into fights. Like I said, it was like a hub of information. You would go there, you know, find out what's going on, who did new pieces, you know, what have you. And you would make it. It was like a daily stop from a certain time. I think it was maybe like right between 3 or 2:30, whatever, to like 4 or 5. It was like there were certain times when you would know, when you would go there, you know people would be there.
Man, that's so cool, you know, because it's like kind of like it's like the early chat room, except that you couldn't just be a faceless person talking shit on a chat room. You had to go there and show your face and like stand up for yourself like that. Yo, it must have been amazing. Also, like I was always interested, still am, like how did like you guys know where the writer's bench was, but no one else knew, like this private network that you guys had? Like when did cops find out about the writer's bench and like break it all up?
No, the cops knew that. I mean, every once in a while, the cops would be like, yo, next train comes, you're getting on. Because they would see all these young kids hanging out there. So every once in a while, cop would come by and be like, yo, next train,
get on.
All of you are getting on. So everyone would get on, ride to the next station, come right back.
Yeah, man, I really like that notion that it was like an information hub and truly was like in a way like an early piece of the internet in a way, chat room, website even, because so much knowledge, so much information and so many brains and meeting of the minds was happening there. It must have been an amazing place.
It was a interesting place to say the least, you know. Again, like I said, you met new people, you met enemies there. It was everything. It was just the hub. It was just there.
Did you ever have any bad experiences there? Did you ever get into any fights there?
I got into a few fights there, yeah. I got into some problems there, you know. It's unavoidable, you know. That's what the bench was.
Right. Was the writer's bench also a place where you would go to handle beef? Like, would you say sometimes. Yeah, no, sometimes you would go and look for, you know, you would know. All right, you may not know what the person looked like, but you got there and you'd be like, yo, who's XYZ? And they'd be like, oh, that's that dude right over there. Yeah.
And shit would just jump off.
So I want to go back a little bit. You said like after that summer when BG just like went nuts and just came back and he just has all this style, and Nicer also was getting better. I mean, it sounds like, and you said it, that you guys were all pushing each other and you were all
Right.
working together. And like Tat Crew was like established. You mentioned, actually, what year was it that Mac did that piece with Scene? Was it around the same time, high school?
Mac had to do that piece. That had to be 84, I would want to say. 84,
Okay.
85,
So you guys
somewhere
are all
around there.
still in high school. And I mean, that must have also been wild. Like you're high school kids, but you're now connected to a really a grown man like Scene, who, I mean, he wasn't that much older than you, but
He
he
was
was
a
older.
girl, yeah, he was
Right.
older. So
Yeah, and like I mean that must have been such a crazy amazing feeling to be this young crew, only a few years old, but you've been around, you've been painting, but now you're connected to a guy like Scene. I mean, it must have been
Yeah.
wild. And it must have given you guys a whole new level of respect from other peers, other young guys like you.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but remember we hooked up with Scene. From then we started hooking up. Like Shane started doing pieces with Dez, and we branched out. You know, I started hanging out with Shy, and that's why I met Min, and then from there we met T Kid. You know, T Kid had already been an older writer, was established before us, and then T Kid introduced us to the Ghost Yard. You know. And from there, we went from just being like on the 6s and 4s, like the 5 and 2s. Now we were in the Ghost Yard. We had like access to more trains. So we were like, all right, this is it. We, at that point, and then we were all good. By that time, we were all good. You know, where we all knew how to paint. Like everyone had their own style. Everybody, you know, we had paint. So we were established. We were a crew at that point. We were a force.
And I'm interested also, like, when was the first time that like Tat Crew did, let's just say even just an end-to-end, maybe not a top to bottom, but just like your first end-to-end production, characters, full pieces, windows down?
Oh, we did a bunch of those in like from 83 on. We did a bunch of those.
Oh, okay. So 83 you guys were doing end-to-ends.
Like 83, 84, yeah, like end of 83, beginning of 84, we started doing like window down, top to bottoms, whole cars.
And you know, I'm just like, well, what I'm wondering is like, did you guys have any idea that for 30 more years you would continue doing this? Not only would you continue doing it, but you would inspire numerous generations of writers all around the world. Like, could that have even been on your radar, or even like a speck of understanding in your mind that was a possibility?
No, I mean, no one ever expected to be writing this long or painting this long. It's just, and the fact that it's funny to hear when people say you've influenced so many writers, like, because in our mind, we're still painting, we're still, you know, so it's like, okay, this is what we do, you know. We forget, we fail to see the other side of what we do.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, you know, that whole like seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing. Like when you're in it, it's really hard to know. And it's why it's nice to actually, I mean, personally, I think it's nice for you to do an interview like this, because you can actually stop when we air this, maybe listen to it and just kind of take it in. But it is hard, man. It's hard to stop and look at what we do while we're still doing it. And I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but I just know every time I get to the wall, I learn something new every time I grab a can of paint. And it's 25 years later.
I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning.
Which I think that's the beauty of this craft, man, is that you don't stop. You continue to refine and get better and better. Even with you, 35 years now. You started writing in 80, 37 years. You know, it's like that's amazing that you keep learning.
I learned stuff from new writers, and I remember when Cap started switching over. I think Cento was one of the first guys who introduced us at the time of Liquitex caps. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
Right.
And I was like, what is this shit? And then, you know, but you continue learning. I mean, as we got, you know, older, you know, we start seeing what some of these younger guys are doing.
Yeah.
You're like, damn, these guys are fucking amazing. But we're like, they're doing stuff that we did back then, but they're doing it with a new twist. So we're like, all right, wait, let's try that. That's, you know,
yeah, dude. And I think those new twists are completely valid. Like, I think a lot of people give a lot of hard time to young writers doing things that may have been done before, but they're doing it different. And so I always show respect. And dude, on that level of respect, man, I want to respect your time. We went over already on this interview, but this has it's been amazing, Bio. And we just basically covered 1976 to 1984, 85-ish. And,
we need a part 2.
Well, yes, I'm glad you said it, because what I like to do now is get people on record. Will you come back and do a part 2 in a few months?
I would definitely come back and do a part 2, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hell yeah, man. Like I'm one of those dudes that you guys inspired early on, very early on. Like, when I first started writing, we would get magazines and we would see stuff out on the West Coast of what you guys were doing. So I thank you. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate that you keep going. And like you said, you keep learning. You're not one of those dudes that just has gotten comfortable. You keep pushing.
No, I'm not comfortable.
It's great to see. Yeah, it's great to see, man. What I also like to ask our guests is, because this episode, it's all about you. So can you tell people that don't know you, that are just hearing you for the first time, where we can find your work, websites, Instagram, Facebooks, that kind of stuff?
My Instagram is Bio Tats Crew. My Facebook is obviously you got to use your real name, Wilfredo Feliciano.
Okay.
And we have the Tats Crew website, tatscrew.net, which is I think currently being updated, so there'll be new stuff up once it launches again.
Okay, great.
And I guess Google. You can Google it.
Definitely. Also, if people want to hire you, buy your work, what's the best way for them to contact you?
They can reach us here at the office, the tatscrew80@gmail.com.
Okay, tatscrew80. That's 80?
Yeah, 80@gmail.com.
Okay. And also, I think, like, you have multiple things showing right now, don't you, gallery-wise?
Yes. That's for the past few years is something I've kind of taken more, not seriously, because I've always taken it seriously, but I've
more emphasis,
gotten more involved in, doing gallery exhibitions and kind of like preserving the work and taking it in a different direction. We've done we've done the streets, we've done, the commercial, and I think the gallery was one of the untapped avenues for us. And, guys like, again, Crash, Days have been very influential in, helping us along with that as well.
Yeah. And so are you showing anything right now that people should know about?
Right now I have a show that's up in New Orleans, a gallery called Brand New Orleans Art Gallery. Mm-hmm. We have an upcoming show here in New York City, June 3rd, I believe. How
long is the New Orleans show going to run?
That one's been up a while. It may run a couple of more weeks more.
Okay. And then how about the new one?
The new one is going to be up June 3rd, and I'm not sure how long that's running. I think I still got some stuff up at Wynwood that's still up at the Wynwood Walls.
Okay.
That should be up through the summer. And we also have at Westchester Arts out in White Plains, we have an exhibition that'll be up through the end of June or July or something as well.
Okay, great. And actually, this is going to air after that, so I think people would be able to go online and look at the show that was, and people just follow Bio's Instagram, you guys, so you can find out what's new. Like I said, dude, I appreciate you. Thanks for spending the time. I know we went over, but it's been really great hearing you.
All right, man. Thank you. Have a good day, man.
Absolutely. Peace, brother. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Life in Letters. We record live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, USA. Our producer is Christopher Piccioni. Our social media manager is Jonathan Drexler. Our videographer is Jordan Milkner for Way Up Creative. Our intern is Tamika Schlesinger. Our theme music is by Fonte. And my name is Adam Fujita. If you guys have got something to say, drop us a line at our Instagram page at My Life in Letters Podcast, or send us an email at mylifeinletterspodcast@gmail.com. We're always looking for your feedback, and we're always looking for ways to grow and be better. Write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Share the podcast with your friends. Get your whole crew to subscribe, and have a great day. Thanks for listening.
The language of letters.
My life.